Every week, college football games hinge on a single word.
Touchdown. Touchdown, Texas. Touchdown, Oklahoma. Touchdown. Touchdown. Touchdown, Wisconsin. Touchdown. 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 Touchdown, Stanford. Touchdown. Touchdown, Alabama. Touchdown, Notre Dame. Touchdown. Wow.
This is Touchdown Radio. Here's Gino Torretta and Taylor Zarzour.
All right, Gino, let's get right to it. There are a lot of people fired up with the rankings, a lot of people that are fired up cheer for the team where you won a Heisman Trophy. So let's get right to it. Oregon's 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, Notre Dame's 4, Georgia's 5, Ohio State's number 6, Tennessee is 7, SMU is number 8, Indiana's 9, Boise State is 10, Alabama is 11. In front of Ole Miss, who's 13, South Carolina's 14, and Arizona State and Iowa State are at 15 and number 16. What's your biggest gripe?
Well, I would say this. In the past, the regular season, and we talked about this, is would the 12-team playoff render the regular season not as important as in prior years? And based on this, you start to debate, or at least I would start to debate, of who is at a certain level when the records are the same, not when the records are worse. And what I mean by that is Alabama's 9-3, Miami's 10-2. It's not a discussion until they have the same records. So if Miami was 9-3, then the debate is Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina. Okay, then we can debate how hard of a schedule is, how hard of this season is. But to me, to tell a Power 5 conference, listen, Miami didn't make their schedule. This is who's in their conference. They're deemed a Power 4 conference. They have a better record in a Power 4 conference than another school in a Power 4 conference. This eye test thing, we're playing better, and it probably brings up a little bit of PTSD for me from 1990, where I thought, and a lot of us thought, we had the best team in the country at the end of the year, but we had lost to BYU to start the year in Ty Detmer, and then we had lost on the road to Notre Dame. And then we beat Texas by 40 points in the bowl game. And it was like, okay, yeah, it sucks, but the regular season matters. And if you have a better record than another school, to me it should have been a non-factor.
Okay, so what you're saying is you would have SMU and Indiana ranked ahead of Georgia, Ohio State, and Tennessee also?
Yes, but that doesn't. To me, that doesn't really matter because they're in.
Yeah,
I'm going.
You're saying, I mean, kind of like the NFL does. Even though the NFL, the schedule isn't the same for all the teams, they're in different divisions. One schedule could be deemed easier than another. They simply go by record
right,
when determining who makes the
correct,
playoffs, and that's what you're saying here.
I would say that, and I would also say, I thought it was interesting that Ward Manuel, after, we're not going to re-rank anybody that isn't playing in a game in the conference championship games. Okay, I understand that, but also, what if a couple of these conference championship games turn out to be blowouts? Because isn't that how, I don't know, in the past when Ohio State beat the heck out of Wisconsin and ended up getting in the championship and ended up beating Alabama and winning the national championship when Zeke was there? Isn't that how they got in, from a dominant conference championship performance? To me, I don't know why you would paint yourself in a box and said, listen, the conference championship games still matter, and it also matters how bad the loser loses or winner wins. I mean,
I really want to get to that, and I've actually reserved a segment of the show today for that. So I want to get to that. It is fascinating what you said, that you would simply put the 10-2 team above the 9-3 teams if everybody is in a power league. And I was listening to SiriusXM Channel 84. Jimbo Fisher was on in the afternoon on, I think it was Tuesday, and Jimbo agreed with you. Jimbo said, hey, listen, now, of course, he is no longer coaching in the SEC, but he said, you didn't have to start the craziest, most difficult, hardest conference in all of college football, but you guys did. And everything isn't equal. And if you do have a worse record in that incredibly hard, challenging conference that everybody thinks is the hardest, tough, that you should ultimately go with the team that has the better record. And I thought that was interesting. I guess where I am on this is I want to put the most deserving team in.
But you become deserving by wins and losses and your record.
I guess, and I know it's probably a little unfair for me to say, what would Miami have done had they played in the SEC? Miami, you saw it, an unbelievable comeback against Cal. The Virginia Tech game was wild finish. Some think that, they didn't get the right team winning the game. I do think they got the right team winning the game, but regardless, there was a couple of times this year where Miami somehow was able to win games that you could argue they shouldn't have. Do I really think they're the most deserving team of those four? Personally, I would have voted for South Carolina if I was in that room. And you say, Taylor, they lost to Alabama. They lost to Ole Miss. And that is a factor to me.
I wouldn't even get to that.
But hold
I
on,
would just say record didn't matter then.
But here's what I would say about the Gamecocks. If we're going to get into officiating and everything else and really watching the games, the officials botched the LSU game. There was no pass interference late in the game. It shouldn't have been a penalty on hitting Garrett Nussmeier after a pick six, and it impacted who won the game. And Lenora Sellers didn't play for half of that game. So if we're really going to watch all these games and use every part of every game, I look at South Carolina almost as a 10-2 team instead of a 9-3. And if I do think that every part of the season matters, but Gino, if I'm going to break a tie, I want who's the best team right now. That would be a huge factor to me. And to me, South Carolina is the best of those four teams. I don't understand this.
But that's not how it has been done always in the past. It's okay,
no,
great.
I'm just saying
there's
my
certain
personal
teams,
preference.
and I'm not going to argue with you that South Carolina isn't hot.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to argue with how does Alabama lose to Oklahoma, who's a 500 team. And I saw them firsthand against Auburn, and I was like, wow, their offense is atrocious. And they fired the offensive coordinator, yet they got the benefit of the doubt and to get in. You can't. To me is, if it's a beauty contest and you say, well, we're just going to put in the hottest teams.
No, I'm not saying do that.
Down to the bottom 12, we're going to put in who we think are the hottest team, which I'm fine with, if the records are the same. Like I would say this: if South Carolina had a terrible loss and they're tied with Miami at 10-2, and they're hotter right now, I get that. But the existing record, what the committee is saying is the regular season doesn't really matter that much. We're still going to put in who we think is the best team. And I can make a case, Alabama on their highest high, do I think they could beat anybody in the top 12? Yes. I think when they're on their game, I think they can beat anybody in the top 12. But their lowest lows were so bad.
No doubt.
I'm like, that to me is an auto disqualifier.
I'd rank them
from getting in.
Personally, I'd rank them fourth among these teams. Here's what I want to say. I do think that they are valuing the entire regular season, Gino. I think that they're determining that Alabama's schedule was significantly harder than Miami's. And it's obvious with what Ward Manuel said to Reese Davis on Tuesday night when Reese said, why is Alabama ahead of Miami? And he said, Reese, Alabama's 3-1 against current teams ranked in the top 25. Miami is 0-1 against, and that's Syracuse, obviously, who just got into the top 25. And okay, that's fine. If that's the reasoning that Alabama is ahead of Miami. Here's where Ward Manuel loses me.
So their two
No, but
losses are go ahead.
Here's where Ward Manuel loses me. So Alabama's 3-1 against the top 25. Miami's 0-1. Ole Miss is 2-0, Gino, against the top 25. South Carolina is 2-1 against the current top 25. So help me. I don't understand how Miami is better than Ole Miss and South Carolina, but they're not better than Alabama. To me, either they're behind all three of these teams, or to your point, because they're 10-2, they're above all three of these teams. I don't see how they're in the middle of all these teams. That makes no sense to me.
No, and I don't know. I still want to see the conference championship games. Like I thought, okay, if something happens in these conference championship games and one of these teams gets blown out, then it's going to be a total re-ranking. But based on what Ward Manuel said, it's not happening.
No. If you're not playing this week, then he's saying that you will stay where you are. Like Alabama will stay ahead of Miami because both teams are not playing. Now, all of this.
Do you think? Let me ask you this: do you think that is a reflection or reaction to SEC coaches saying, we don't want to be in the SEC championship game. We want the week off. We want to be the third best team because the third best team is automatically getting into the playoffs. And they had so many coaches say that prior to the championship game. Now, what the committee is saying is, hey, you get in the conference championship game, especially in the SEC, we don't care if you get the brakes blown off you in the conference championship game. You're in the top 12 no matter what.
I do think that is a factor, yes. And I think the biggest place it's a factor is here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Because to me, what you just said means that if SMU loses to Clemson, SMU is still in the playoff, which means this conversation that we just spent the first 10 minutes of the show on doesn't matter. Alabama would be out in that scenario. If Clemson beats SMU, which I think there's a real chance is going to happen, by the way, because it's going to feel like a Clemson home game on Saturday night. No
question.
If Clemson beats SMU on Saturday night, then all four of these teams, Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, won't make it into the playoff. And I do think that would happen. I think if Clemson wins the game, SMU stays in, and I think they stay in for the reasons you just referenced. I think that the committee is going to say, through 12 games, SMU is the number 8 team in the country. And if we're comparing them to teams that didn't play this weekend, we should compare them through those 12 games. I think that's the way that they're going to do it. Some people may disagree with it, but I think that is what they've decided to do. One last thing I got to ask you. You have any problem with Ohio State? Ohio State just loses at home to Michigan, to a 6-5 Michigan team. Clearly the Wolverines are in Ryan Day and the Buckeyes' head. Ohio State was number 2 last week. They dropped to number 6. Miami loses to an 8-3 Syracuse team. They were number 6. They fall to number 12. Miami falls 6 spots, losing to an 8-3 team on the road, while Ohio State falls 4 spots, losing to a 6-5 team at home. You have a problem with that?
Yes, I think they should have dropped more, significantly more. I mean, I still think, listen, if they obviously they beat Indiana, so I would think at worst they dropped to 8, and Indiana's 9. But there's no question. I think Ohio State should have dropped more, and that's a home game. And I get the committee seems to give more credence to, hey, if you're on the road, we get it. It's tough and it's hard to play on the road, and it's hard to play on the road and win games. But Miami lost on the road in one of the loudest domes in the country to a team that's 9-3. I mean, now Syracuse is ranked, and that's what, to me, they have said, at least in their actions, that the conference of the ACC and the Big 12 are behind the Big 10 and the SEC. And if that is their view, and we're going to have a playoff, we're going to have a legitimate playoff at the end of the year, in my eyes, you better expand the playoff. You get rid of conference championship games, and you go to scheduling like the NFL, where the SEC plays the Big 10 or ACC Big 12, and you guys are all playing against each other. because what then tiebreakers become actual records and actual records against conferences that everybody's going to have similar to the NFL, because or else you're going to have the same scenario where we're talking about, I still with the last spot, Miami's got a better record. I mean, that matters for something. And I get it where, hey, they've had some close games and things like that. But Alabama, I mean, the loss to Oklahoma, I mean, to me is an automatic disqualifier.
I think Alabama fans would have been okay if most Alabama fans, not all of them, but some Alabama fans would have been okay if Miami was ahead of them, because they would have said exactly what you've said. They would have said we hadn't looked like a playoff team. They didn't look like a playoff team in the Iron Bowl this past week.
Right.
It's not just one game. You said at their best. I don't know, man.
They're pretty good at their best.
Months ago at their best, maybe, but not right now. They've got to get rid of the automatic conference champion bye too for the 4 top conference champions. That's got to go away. I mean, the idea that Boise State or Arizona State or Iowa State is going to be a 3 or 4 seed instead of the second best Big Ten team or the second best SEC team or Notre Dame, I think is really silly. This is hard to follow. It's too hard to follow for the common fan. Listen, it's great that we have it. Anytime you start something new, you're going to have tweaks to it. But, the idea that you are, we're ranked number 4, but we're
Notre Dame is 4.
6.
They can't be any higher than 5. So why not just put them at 5?
Right. I mean, Ohio State's the 6th seed, but they're really the 8th. And that's going to be very confusing to the fans, and we don't need to confuse the fans. The last thing I want to say is, and this has been a long segment, we had a lot to do. Mario Cristobal, what are you doing, man? It's 4th and goal at the 10-yard line with 3:44 to go in the game. You can't kick a 27-yard field goal to be down 4. That does you no good. And I hear what you're saying, Gino, about they should be in the playoff, but I think Mario Cristobal is going to have to live with that decision for the rest of his coaching career. It's 4th and goal at the 10, and who knows, maybe they don't score and they lose by 7, but at least they go down swinging, losing by 7. Kicking that field goal was senseless, Gino. Made no sense.
Well, you need a touchdown and a stop no matter what. Whether you kick it or not, it doesn't change what you need. And they kicked a field goal, and they still needed a stop and still needed a touchdown to win the game. And I would agree with you, and I think you have a quarterback that's had the best season of any Miami quarterback in its history. 2 guys won a Heisman. Bunch of guys are all pros. A few guys are in the NFL Hall of Fame. And how you have the ball in his hands and you don't take a swing, that to me, it's like, you got Babe Ruth is in the batter's box, and you try to steal home, and the guy gets punched out, and he's walking back to the dugout, and that's the 3rd out. That to me it was a travesty, because I think that had they scored, had they tied it, had they win, now that's a lot of ifs going down the road. Maybe that turns into Cam Ward's Heisman Trophy moment. But now he's not going to have that opportunity, or didn't have that opportunity, won't have that opportunity in a conference championship game. But, I would agree. The strength of your team was Cam Ward in the offense, and you put the ball in the hands of the defense.
It's a shame. It really is. And Miami is not going to the playoffs because of it. All right, when we come back, I want to talk about all these scenarios, and we're going to play what if with what if Oregon beats Penn State, then what does that mean? What if Texas beats Georgia in a rematch? Then what does that mean for the playoffs? We'll do that next on Touchdown Radio Tailgate. So, Gino, let's go through some of these conference championship games. We have 9 of them this weekend. Conference USA has theirs. It's a rematch of last week's game. Jacksonville State and Western Kentucky play. Winner wins Conference USA. The American Conference Championship game is Friday night. It's Army versus Tulane. Army's in the rankings now. They're number 24. Tulane fell out. They lost to Memphis. Memphis is now number 25. The winner wins the American Conference. The MAC Championships in Detroit. Miami of Ohio is playing Ohio. Winner wins the MAC there on Ford Field Saturday in Detroit. The Sun Belt Championship will be the Ragin' Cajuns of Louisiana against the Thundering Herd of Marshall, and that is Saturday night. So those are conference championship games that do not have playoff implications. There are only 5 that do. Everybody believes that the winner of Boise State UNLV will be in the playoffs. Boise State wins the game, Gino, they get a bye. They're going to be a 3 or a 4 seed in the playoffs. There are a couple of scenarios where they could be a 3 seed, most likely would be a 4 seed. If UNLV wins the game, chances are UNLV would be a 12 seed. That game is in Boise, Idaho, by the way, Gino. So a huge advantage for the Broncos there against Barry Odom and the Runnin' Rebels.
Well, no question. But Boise State, and obviously it's another opportunity for Ashton Jeanty to get a top as we received our Heisman ballots this week. It's another opportunity to him to play because really of the guys that were top 4, there's only 2 of them to get a chance to play in these conference championship games, and it could shake up the rankings.
Then you've got the Big 12 championship game on Saturday. That Mountain West game is Friday night. The Big 12 championships in Arlington, Saturday, noon Eastern, number 15 Arizona State against number 16 Iowa State. There are some scenarios where the winner of this game could be a 3 or could be a 4 seed. And they would need Clemson and UNLV to both win their conference championship games in order for that to happen. But there's also a chance, Gino, that the winner of this game is going to be the 12 seed if they win this game. And clearly the Big 12 only gets one bid.
Yeah. And the winner, if they're down at 12, then obviously they got to play the conference championship game. Then they get 0 bye, and they're back on the road the next week. But hey, they're in the playoffs. You get a big share of a big pile of money, and I got to say, Arizona State, what a season they've had. I mean, props to them. They've played great all year, and it again. This is still the committee has deemed certain power, quote unquote, conferences lesser than, and that's I would say that's unfortunate for all of college football.
And again, these 2 different conference champions most likely will be either a 3 or a 4 seed, or they'll be the 12 seed. Okay, now let's go to the ACC championship game. That's Saturday night in Charlotte. SMU is number 8. Clemson is number 17. But in the seeding, SMU is not number 8. SMU is number 3 right now in the seeding. So if SMU wins the game, they're going to be the 3 seed, G. They're going to be behind the Big Ten and the SEC. SMU, in every scenario, would be the number 3 seed in the college football playoff. They'd most likely get a bye. Well, they will certainly get a bye, and they most likely would play in the Peach Bowl, awaiting the winner of the 6-11 matchup. If SMU loses the game to Clemson, the Clemson Tigers could be a 4 seed. That's if UNLV beats Boise State. Or more likely, Clemson would be a 12 seed in the college football playoff, and SMU would still be in. SMU would most likely be a 10 seed, somewhere around there. And that'll be the interesting thing to me. Does SMU slip? Do they stay at number 8 if they lose the game? Do they stay ahead of Indiana, Boise State, Alabama, or do they fall behind any of these teams?
And you look at where Clemson, who lost to South Carolina last week, they dropped 5 spots. So now if Clemson beat SMU, you're saying Clemson or SMU is only going to drop 1 or 2. It's just
do they even drop it all?
It's that's where I was shocked when Ward Emanuel said we're not re-ranking these teams. I'm like, wow, you don't know how these games are going to turn out. So what you're saying is this is it. This is what it's going to look like. And
so that, yeah,
in a season of greatness, I would say, of every week, like this season delivered. It didn't matter what week, what team, what conference. It delivered great games. It delivered upsets. to not have that factor or consideration to say, hey, you know what? They got beat by 50 in a conference championship game. We can't put them in the top 12. I just, to me, it was mind blowing when I heard that.
So that's what I wanted to ask you about next. So Texas is playing Georgia in Atlanta, SEC championship game on Saturday. Fired up to be there. It's going to be great to have those two teams in the SEC championship game. Texas, its first year in the conference, it's going to bring all their fans to Atlanta. It'll be a great atmosphere there against the Georgia Bulldogs. Let's say Texas wins the matchup, Gino, wins the rematch. Georgia whipped them in Austin earlier this year. But let's say Texas gets them. Clearly, Texas would be the number 2 seed. I don't think there's a scenario where Texas would be the number 1. If Penn State beats Oregon, I would think Penn State would jump Texas because Penn State would beat the number 1 undefeated 12-0 team, and I would think that would put Penn State at number 1. I realize that's, me guessing, projecting a little bit, but that's, I think, most likely what would happen. So if Texas wins the game, does that mean that Georgia stays as the number 7 seed when the rankings come out on Sunday, even if they lose the game, and it doesn't matter how they lose the game? Does Georgia stay ahead of Ohio State and Tennessee no matter what? Even if they lose the game convincingly and it's a third loss? Help me here.
Well, did the committee give themselves some cover by putting Alabama at 9-3 at 12? And let's say Georgia gets, if Georgia plays bad offensively, Texas has the weapons. Let's say Texas wins by a sizable margin.
Mm-hmm.
Did the committee give themselves some cover for keeping Georgia into the top 12 because they've already got Alabama at 9-3 at 11? That to me is what's going to be very interesting. And, this is where the committee, based on these rankings and this home game, there's a decided advantage when you're playing in certain stadiums at home. And listen, you and I have been to them, and you're like, there is no question there's a decided advantage. They may not have the best team, but that team and the home field, you give them the edge.
Texas is going to travel, there's no question, but that's basically a Georgia home game on Saturday.
Right. And so that's what's going to be very interesting where these teams, because it just seemed to me like, hey, this is the penultimate rankings, but these are the teams that are in. And,
and if Georgia if Georgia loses the game and loses it convincingly, you're telling the Tennessee Volunteers they have no chance of hosting a home playoff game. They're right now, they would be the number 9 seed. I realize they're ranked 7th, but they would be seeded 9th playing at Ohio State. And I went through every different sort of situation here, and I think Tennessee is staying at number 9, and they're going to play at Ohio State in the Horseshoe in the first round. If, in fact, what you're saying is true, that they're not going to reseed Georgia and they're not going to penalize Georgia for losing the SEC championship game, I would think Tennessee would be pulling for Texas, and that way maybe Georgia falls behind them, but I don't see it happening. And here's the other one I wanted to mention to you. So Oregon is playing Penn State in Indianapolis, and I realize the Ducks have a lot of fans. They're the only undefeated team in college football. What a season. Dan Lanning, that guy, I could watch him, break helmets and give all these motivational speeches every day. That is, I think, absolutely the best team in college football. But they're going to be on the road. They're playing basically at Penn State. Every Penn Stater is going to come to Indianapolis. They hadn't been in that game in 8 years. It's going to be a huge advantage for Penn State.
And look how they played against Wisconsin. They struggled against Wisconsin. They pulled it out at the end.
On the road.
But they did win the game. And I'd argue Penn State is a more, potent team, especially on offense, than Wisconsin.
So if Oregon goes and beats Penn State, are we going to just simply keep Penn State where they're currently seated at number 5? They're not going to move behind Notre Dame. They would just stay there at number 5. Again, that's I don't know.
That's why I don't get how the committee has said we're not re-ranking when it matters. SMU and Clemson. That matters. Who wins that game and how the game is won or lost. Boise State, that game matters, and how that game is won or lost matters for teams that are right behind them. Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina. But basically what the committee said is it doesn't matter.
So, sort of the way it feels. So, it's a lot of fascinating stuff to watch this weekend with how all this is going to play out. Again, the one that has most of my interest is the one here in Charlotte, SMU Clemson, because it feels like Alabama is pulling for SMU. And if Clemson wins the game, Alabama's out, SMU stays in. So that'll be fun to watch here on Saturday night. You referenced that a couple of Heisman finalists, at least we think Heisman finalists, haven't been announced yet, but we think they're Heisman finalists, are playing this weekend, and a couple others aren't. Gino and I are both Heisman voters. Should we just go ahead and vote now? Or should we wait and see what Ashton Ginty and Dylan Gabriel do this weekend? We'll discuss that next on Touchdown Radio Tailgate. Gino, are we on the same page that Colorado's dual threat, and I say dual threat, two-way player, Travis Hunter, Boise State's phenomenal running back, Ashton Ginty, Oregon's quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, and Miami's quarterback, Cam Ward, are the four guys we're thinking about for the Heisman Trophy? Is there anybody else that we need to be thinking about?
I would say those four. I mean, that's kind of the four that have separated themselves probably since the middle of October with their performances. But I would think it's safe to say those four. I think there are other guys that, listen, I tried to promote Ty Warren from the tight end from Penn State after he lit up USC, and it just seemed like I didn't get any support from the from the Penn State media department, because I was like, that's the greatest performance I think I saw all season, is that performance as an all-around player. Yeah, I just want to give a shout out. But there are other guys that have had great seasons, but I would think those four have separated themselves from everybody else.
Now, you are a Heisman Trophy winner, and I love celebrating you this time of year. You won the award 32 years ago, if you can believe that. My goodness. Wow. 7 years ago, we had your 25-year anniversary, wow, and that feels like it was yesterday. It's already been 7 years later from that. And even though you won the award, every year you always ask me, hey, so let's talk about it. Heisman Trophy, when are we voting? What are you thinking? Who are the finalists? I'm going to turn the tables on you this year.
All right.
Should we go ahead and vote now? Because Travis Hunter and Cam Ward aren't playing this weekend? Or should we watch Ashton Ginty on Friday night at home on the blue turf against the UNLV Runnin' Rebels? Should we watch Dylan Gabriel Saturday night play the Penn State Nittany Lions? Or should we just go ahead and do it right now? What do you think?
No, I don't think you vote. I think that, listen, to win the Heisman, you want to see performances against the best and how they perform against the best. And I think it's an opportunity for both. They might already be on somebody's ballot or a voter's ballot, but how they perform in that huge stage against the quote-unquote best in their conference may change where they are on that ballot. And I would just go, I think that obviously this year is probably a little bit more difficult than others, about a player not necessarily separating himself from everybody, and you have a clear-cut front runner. But, the people, and I hear it every year, oh, it's got to be easy to vote for the Heisman. You just pick, you pick these guys. You get a ballot, and there's 6 blank lines. One says name, the second line says school, : and you fill it out yourself. It doesn't say offensive guy, defensive guy, Power 4 conference player, anything like that. So when you start thinking about it truly as a college football fan, and listen, we're doing games every weekend. And I told you the greatest performance I saw this season was Ty Warren at Penn State. against USC. Okay, that was what I saw with my own eyes, and that affects how I vote is when I see guys with my own eyes and how they perform. Now, not everybody will vote like that, but it is very difficult when you start putting a ballot together. You say, okay, well, Cam and Dylan are the quarterbacks. You got to kind of compare them against their stats against each other. Well, how does that factor in, against Hunter and his offensive and defensive stats, and Genty against, okay, well, how did he do against Oregon, and what's he going to do in the conference championship game? It is not an easy task to just pick. And I would say to honor 3 players with your vote, because even a third place vote is listen, the award
That's
says
a big deal,
a huge deal, and it says most outstanding player. It doesn't say best player power conference. It doesn't say anything like that. It says who do you think is the most outstanding player in college football in that year, and how people decide that is in their own head, and they decided how they wanted to decide it. But I think it's very difficult. I think it's probably the most in, I don't know, 5-10 years at least this year, because it seems like that any of those top 4 could make a damn good case of being the most outstanding player.
Travis Hunter is the favorite, by the way. He's the odds-on favorite right now. He had 3 touchdowns last week and an interception in that blowout victory over Oklahoma State. Phenomenal player from the Colorado Buffaloes. Ginty's had over 2,200 yards rushing. One of his worst performances this year was against UNLV, where he only had just over 120 yards rushing in the game. So to your point, it'll be good to see him against, you could argue, the second best team that he's played all year. Oregon's the best team that Boise's played all year. And then Ginty will play against UNLV this weekend. I think Cam Ward is phenomenal. I think that it's interesting to hear you say, as a Heisman winner at Miami, in my opinion, you had the greatest season any Miami quarterback's ever had. For you to say Cam Ward's had a better season than you had certainly carries a lot of weight. I think Gabriel has the most work to do. And I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about him. You just watched him play against Washington. This Heisman voter, Taylor, needs to see Dylan Gabriel go off on Saturday night if I'm going to put Gabriel ahead of those other 3.
Well, I would agree with that, but I would agree with why is that the reason? The reason that is of all the games I broadcast and just did the Washington Oregon, the best defensive team that I saw all year is Oregon. There's a reason they're undefeated. There's a reason they're number 1. They were the best defensive team. They were the best prepared. They played the best on Saturday afternoon. And because of that, Dylan Gabriel doesn't need Cam Ward stats. Cam Ward and Miami needed Cam Ward stats to be 10-2. And I would say that what he has done is still pretty amazing. He's been consistent, whether it's running the ball, consistent. He's done what he's needed to do, and I think that their team is so good. Maybe that has hurt him. Will hurt him. Has hurt him with voters because he doesn't need to put up stats like Cam Ward. But because most people, I would say most voters, they say, hey, if there's 3 quarterbacks, okay, what was their schedule? Who did they play against? And what were their statistics? And I think obviously Cam Ward's got the best statistically powerful argument this season at quarterback. But Dylan Gabriel and being undefeated, and I know how hard that is to go undefeated. Sometimes you take a little bit lesser stats to be undefeated.
Ginty, by the way, did have 192 yards rushing against the Ducks earlier this year in that week 1 3-point loss that the Broncos had at Oregon. So we'll see if he goes off on Friday night. We'll see what Gabriel does on Saturday night. And then my family will gather around and watch me stressfully vote for the Heisman Trophy on Sunday night. We will come back and we'll make picks on this weekend's games next on Touchdown Radio Tailgate. We are pumped to be with you to make picks on these games this week. We're going to be pumped to be with you as we go through the national championship here on Touchdown Radio Tailgate on SiriusXM Channel 84. Love doing this show with my guy, Gino Torretta. How about this, Gino? There are 9 matchups this week. There used to be 10 conference championship games. Obviously now the Pac-12 sort of kind of isn't anymore. So we only have 9 conference championship games. The largest line in the 9 games, Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns are a 5.5-point favorite against Marshall. Every other line is smaller than that. So all 9 games are 1-score lines in terms of the Vegas odds makers. Let's go through it. I hope they're right. Yeah, I do too.
By the way, did I press before the pick since the first bet is definitely over with? So
you're going to have to hog press. Yeah, we're on the 18th hole, and you're just like you're trying to cut your losses now. Last weekend, Jacksonville State lost at Western Kentucky 19-17. This weekend, Western Kentucky has to play at Jacksonville State. I'm picking Rich Rod and Jacksonville State to win Conference USA. How about you?
I would go with you. I'm going with the home team there.
Okay. Now, who's going to the college football playoff? Will it be number 10 Boise State or number 20 UNLV? Boise's a 4-point favorite Friday night at 8 o'clock on Fox. This is on the blue turf in Boise, Idaho. Who do you have?
I want to go full just chaos at the end of this season and pick UNLV, but I really want Genty to have a big game, and I'll take Boise State, and I think he does well.
Yeah, I am too. I'm going to pick Boise to win the game. I will say, if this game was on a neutral field or if it was in Vegas, then I would pick the Runnin' Rebels, but I'm going to take the Broncos. The home field turf is a big reason for that, and adjust your eyes accordingly Friday night. Tulane Green Wave play at Army. How cool is it that number 24 Army is hosting a game at their own stadium, Mitchie Stadium in West Point, to play for the American Championship game Friday night at 8 o'clock. The Green Wave are 4.5-point favorites on the road, G.
Upset alert. I'm taking Army. I'm taking Army at home. Tulane lost last week against Memphis. I'm taking Army to win the AAC.
I hope you are correct. That's what I'm pulling for to have happen.
But
I'm picking Tulane to win the game. Let's go to Saturday's games. The Big 12 championship is in Arlington. Number 15 Arizona State's a 2.5-point favorite against number 16 Iowa State. 12 o'clock kick on ABC. I have a hard time ever going against Matt Campbell and the Clones. So much respect for his program. But Kenny Dillingham and the Sun Devils have something special going. I'm going with ASU.
Works up. I would agree with you. Dillingham's got him playing right at Arizona State. I'm going to take Arizona State.
MAC championship is in Detroit. Miami of Ohio against Ohio. It's a noon kick. The Miami of Ohio club is a 3-point favorite. I'll take them.
Yeah, I'm going to go Miami of Ohio too.
Okay, Redhawks win it.
Home
SEC championship is in Atlanta, GA. Number 5 Georgia is a 2.5-point underdog against number 2 Texas. 4 o'clock on ABC. I take the Horns in the rematch here, even though Georgia crushed Texas the first time they played.
I'm going to take Georgia. For some reason, obviously it's a home game, in the dome. I'm going to take Georgia, and I don't know if that creates more chaos in the top 12, but I'm going to take Georgia at home.
I'm going to get an all-caps dad text message if Grady Zarzour just heard that pick. Sun Belt Championship, Louisiana versus Marshall, 7 o'clock on ESPN. I'm taking the Ragin' Cajuns at home, Gino.
Yeah, Ragin' Cajuns, they've always played well. They're 5.5-point favorite. I will take them as well.
2 more games to go to. Let's go next to the ACC Championship here in Charlotte. Number 8 SMU against number 17 Clemson, 8 o'clock on ABC. Give me Clemson to win the game. It's basically a home game, Gino.
I'm going against the home game odds. I think Rhett Lashley's got his quarterback back healthy, is full 100%. I'm taking SMU to win the game.
Good pick. They haven't lost a game with him at quarterback. And number 1 Oregon plays number 3 Penn State, the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis. Give me the Ducks to complete the 13-0 start to the season.
Yeah, I think Oregon, it rolls in this game. I just think that what I saw last week against Washington, they seem well prepared. They're focused. They have weapons all over the field on offense. They got an unbelievable defense, and I'm taking the Ducks.
There are the picks. There's the show for this week. We're back next week to talk about the playoffs and the Heisman Trophy on Touchdown Radio Tailgate here on SiriusXM.